My father, we carried almost two sisters and one brother. And they left me.
Have an auction bench, and they put you up on the bench and bid on you, the same as you're bidding on cattle, you know.
They spent decades hiding these recordings. When you hear what Fountain Hughes said about being sold on auction blocks like cattle, you'll understand why the American education system buried these voices for generations.
We had no home, you know. We just turned out like a lot of cattle. You know how to turn the cattle out in the pasture?
These aren't actors. These are the last living witnesses of slavery. And what they revealed exposes the systematic brutality that built this nation. In 1949, a Baltimore interviewer found a 101-year-old man named Fountain Hughes living in a small room.
My name is Fountain Hughes. I was born in Charlottesville, Virginia. My grandfather belonged to Thomas Jefferson. My grandfather was 115 years old when he died.
When he started speaking, the truth about American slavery became impossible to deny.
We were slaves. We belonged to people. They sell us like they sell horses and cows and hogs.
This wasn't a metaphor. This was a memory. The Library of Congress has these recordings. They've had them since the 1940s, but somehow they never made it into your history textbooks. 4 elderly Black Americans, born into slavery, speaking into microphones decades after their supposed freedom, told stories that destroy every comfortable lie about the peculiar institution. Fountain Hughes remembered the exact mechanics of human sale. His voice, preserved on magnetic tape, described standing on auction benches while white men bid on black bodies.
They have an auction bench, and they put you up on the bench and bid on you, the same as you're bidding on cattle, you know.
This wasn't distant history when Hughes spoke these words in 1949. He was describing his childhood, his mother's reality, the system that treated his entire family as livestock with market value. But the most damaging revelation came when Hughes described what happened after so-called emancipation.
It just turned out like a lot of cattle. You know how to turn the cattle out in the pasture? Well, after freedom, you know, colored people didn't have nothing. Colored people didn't have no beds when they were slaves. You don't sleep on the floor.
Just children sleeping on floors, hiding in underwear at night, running from the same people who had claimed to own them. The government that freed them provided nothing. The system that enslaved them kept everything. Hughes couldn't even walk across the street without written permission. I couldn't go from here across the street, or I couldn't go through nobody's house without I have a note or something from my master.
Now, I couldn't go from here across the street, or I couldn't go to nobody's house without I have a note or something from my master. And if I had that pass, that was what we call a pass. If I had that pass, I could go wherever he sent me.
Every movement tracked, every hour accounted for. Every step required white authorization. This was the freedom they gave him. Harriet Smith's testimony exposed something darker, how violence against Black families continued long after slavery ended. Her husband, a respected churchman known by white folks, was ambushed on a Cedar Break road, shot down in broad daylight. The killer? A young white man Harriet had nursed as a baby.
That boy that killed my husband, I nursed him when he was a baby.
She had fed him at her breast, raised him alongside her own children, and he grew up to murder her husband on a familiar road. His mother tried to stop him, Smith remembered. The killer said, "I ain't gonna let him kill me like he did Uncle Jay."
His mother tried to keep him from killing him, but he just said, "I ain't gonna let him kill me like he did Uncle Jay."
But there was no Uncle Jay. There was no threat. Just the inherited fear and hatred that made a white man see danger in a Black man walking home from work. The white community, WK and others, found the body first. They brought the news. They controlled the narrative. And Harriet Smith lived with that controlled story for the rest of her life, knowing the boy she'd kept alive as an infant had destroyed her family. Laura Smalley's memory carried the weight of witness torture. She described how a woman named Martha Albert was dragged to a peach orchard.
And Martha Albert hurt her wrist,
And she asked her then, says, what you doing in this house here? Hurting old mister. Said she wasn't hurting old mister. She just, old mister around whooping, she saw her down.
Her hands tied around a tree and whipped until she could do nothing but kick her feet in the dirt. I remember that just as well. Look like to me I can, Smalley said. The image burned into her mind across decades.
I remember that just as well. Look like to me I can. And round a tree and whipped her. And well, she couldn't do nothing but just kick her feet, just kick her feet.
The punishment came from a fabricated accusation, an elderly white woman claiming injury where none existed. No trial, no evidence, just immediate public brutalization. The orchard, a place that should symbolize sweetness and abundance, became a site of sanctioned torture. Smalley watched as a child, forced to witness what happened to black women who were accused of the slightest transgression. The message was clear. This could be you. What made this testimony so damaging wasn't just the violence, it was the casualness. The way plantation owners turned everyday spaces into chambers of punishment. The way children were made to watch, ensuring the next generation understood their place. Alice Gaston was a child when the Yankees came through, but her supposed liberators brought their own terror. They carried my father away and carried away my 2 sisters and 1 brother, and they left me.
And they carried my father away and carried my 2 sisters and 1 brother. And they left me.
Here was the truth about the Civil War that no textbook admits. Union soldiers also destroyed black families. They took who they wanted, left who they didn't, and called it liberation. But Gaston's testimony revealed something even more perverse. Her mistress ran to hide in the garden, terrified of the Yankees, and coached the enslaved children to lie for her.
I can remember when my mistress used to run in the garden upon the Yankees and tell us if they come, don't tell them where they're at.
The same children who had been enslaved were now expected to protect their enslavers.
Don't get scared now and tell them where they is.
A child trained to lie for the people who owned her. Loyalty demanded from those who had never received protection. Before we expose what these survivors revealed about the auction blocks, the whippings, and the families torn apart, if you believe these hidden testimonies need to be heard, subscribe to Black Stories Untold and help us ensure these voices are never silenced again. Now back to the video. Laura Smalley's second testimony exposed the deliberate starvation used as control. She described a man given only a single ear of corn for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Give me a corn. Give me a corn. Just like, you give me a year of corn.
This wasn't neglect. This was calculated cruelty designed to break the human spirit while keeping the body barely functional enough to work. Slow starvation as behavioral modification. Hunger as a tool of dominance. The man was expected to work full days on 3 ears of corn. When he moved too slowly from weakness, they called him lazy. When he moved too quickly despite the hunger, they reduced his rations further. There was no winning, only survival or death. Fountain Hughes carried one more revelation that shattered the myth of black families separated only by sale. His father died fighting in the Union Army, the very force supposedly fighting for his freedom.
During the army, and my father got killed in the army, so it left us small children just to live on whatever people choose to give us.
His father had joined the force of liberation and never returned. The war that was meant to free them orphaned them instead. No widow's pension for Hughes's mother. No support for the children. Just survival on whatever people choose to give us. The same precarious existence they'd known in slavery, now without even the perverse protection of being someone's property. These recordings have existed since the 1940s. The Library of Congress preserved them. Historians knew about them. Yet for decades, they remained buried in archives while schools taught sanitized versions of slavery. Why? Because these voices make it impossible to maintain comfortable lives. You can't listen to Fountain Hughes describe auction blocks and then pretend slavery was just unpaid labor. You can't hear Harriet Smith's story and claim racial violence ended with emancipation. You can't process Laura Smalley's testimony and reduce slavery to economic theory. John Henry Falk and Herman Norwood, the interviewers who preserved these voices, understood they were capturing something irreplaceable: the last witnesses, the final testimony, the voices that would disappear forever if not preserved on magnetic tape. They were right. Every person in these recordings is long dead, but their words remain, cutting through decades of deliberate historical revision. 4 voices out of millions, but enough to destroy the fundamental lies America tells itself. Today, we have these recordings freely available online. Anyone can listen to Fountain Hughes describe being treated as livestock. Anyone can hear Harriet Smith's pain. Anyone can access Laura Smalley's memories of torture. Anyone can understand Alice Gaston's stolen childhood. But how many people know they exist? How many teachers play them in classrooms? How many textbooks quote them? The systematic erasure continues, just with different methods. When states ban teaching about systemic racism, they're banning Fountain Hughes' voice. When schools remove divisive concepts, they're removing Harriet Smith's testimony. When politicians attack critical race theory, they're attacking the truth Laura Smalley preserved. When textbooks minimize slavery's horror, they're silencing Alice Gaston all over again. These 4 elderly Black Americans spoke their truth into microphones, knowing they were the last. No one younger had these memories. No one else could testify to what they'd seen, felt, survived. In their words, you hear the exhaustion of carrying unbearable memories, the weight of being living evidence, the burden of knowing that if they didn't speak, the truth would die with them. Fountain Hughes lived to 101, carrying the memory of auction blocks for nearly a century. Harriet Smith lived with the image of her husband's murder. Laura Smalley never forgot the peach orchard. Alice Gaston remembered being left behind. They didn't speak for sympathy. They spoke for the record. They spoke so we would know. They spoke because someone finally asked, finally listened, finally preserved their words. And now we have them. Voices from slavery's last survivors, telling us exactly what America did to Black bodies, Black families, Black futures. Not interpretation, not speculation. Direct testimony from those who lived it. Their voices remain as evidence. Evidence of a system built on breaking Black bodies. Evidence of violence that continued after supposed freedom. Evidence of families destroyed, children traumatized, humans reduced to property. Evidence that cannot be denied, only ignored. If this hidden history opened your eyes to what they've been hiding, click on that video right there to discover another piece of suppressed Black history